Imagine stepping into your favorite neighborhood diner one chilly evening. It's a place where the locals greet you with a familiar smile, where the smell of fresh coffee hangs in the air, and where life's everyday dramas unfold among the clinking plates and casual chatter. But tonight, something extraordinary is about to happen. A stranger, seemingly down on his luck, finds a seat in a quiet corner. He has no obvious means to pay for a proper meal, and hardly a place to lay his head. Yet, unbeknownst to everyone, he hides a secret so shocking that it will soon change countless lives forever. The small coastal town of Willowdale was known for its friendly faces, subdued atmosphere, and the comforting lullaby of the ocean waves at night. With a population just shy of 10,000, everyone seemed to know everyone, or at least that was the impression shared by long-time residents. But one Tuesday afternoon, a man no one recognized shuffled into Bethany's diner, wearing a heavy jacket and carrying the burdens of the world in his tired eyes. Bethany's diner had been a cornerstone of Willowdale for over 30 years. Its walls were lined with faded Polaroids of smiling customers who once frequented the place, some of them local fishermen who had since retired, others families who'd moved away. There was a certain nostalgia, a warmth that kept both locals and weary travelers coming back. And in one corner next to the coat rack, an old jukebox still played hits from the 1980s and 90s, giving the place an everlasting vintage glow. On this particular afternoon, Emma Lawrence, a waitress who had been working at the diner for 5 years, noticed the man as soon as he walked in. She prided herself on her keen eye remembering customers and picking up on their subtle moods. This stranger, however, was different. He looked exhausted, like he'd been sleeping in his car, or maybe had spent too many nights awake. His clothes, though seemingly expensive at one point, were worn muddied along the cuffs and gave off a faint odor of dampness. Despite his disheveled appearance, he carried himself with a quiet dignity. Emma walked over with a welcoming smile. "Hi there. Welcome to Bethany's diner. Can I get you something to drink?" He looked up, revealing an expression torn between gratitude and apprehension. "Just water, please," he said in a soft voice. I'm just looking for a place to sit for a while, if that's okay." "Sure," she said, noticing the subdued tremor in his voice. "Take your time. Let me know if you need a menu." He nodded and glanced around as if looking for something or someone. His gaze flickered across the small group of regulars. At the counter sat Linda Thompson, a retired schoolteacher sipping tea and reading a romance novel. In a booth near the front window, Henry and Sarah Jenkins, an older couple, were sharing a slice of apple pie. A tired father with 2 energetic kids filled another booth by the jukebox. The din of conversation was comforting, a testament to the sense of community Willowdale took pride in. Settling into a booth near the back, the stranger removed his jacket, carefully folding it and placing it beside him. Emma returned with a glass of water and gently set it down. For a moment, their eyes met, and she felt a wave of concern. Typically, customers who ordered only water eventually ordered something else, or else left after a few minutes. The way he clutched the glass, taking small sips, suggested that water was all he could afford. "You sure you don't want anything else?" Emma asked gently. "A coffee or some soup?" "It's on special today." He eyed the specials board. A bowl of clam chowder was $4.99, but even that seemed beyond his immediate reach. "I'm okay," he said, forcing a smile. "But thank you for asking." Emma studied him for another moment. She noticed subtle details, the faint lines across his forehead, indicating deeper stress, the slight trembling of his fingers, and the way his shoulders stiffened whenever someone walked close to him. She had seen this posture before in those who were either running from something or had lost nearly everything. Emma's compassion had led her to do many small acts of kindness over the years. She once gave a slice of pie to a teenager who looked like he'd spent the night on the streets. Another time she had quietly paid for an elderly man's meal when she overheard him confess to a friend that he couldn't afford his medication and a meal. Her manager, Bethany's daughter Charlotte, sometimes winked and looked the other way, well aware of Emma's occasional acts of generosity. The diner had a tight profit margin, but the owners understood the power of kindness in a small community. Stepping behind the counter, Emma approached Charlotte, who was wiping coffee stains from a menu. "We have a new customer," Emma whispered, nodding toward the man in the corner booth. "He seems like he's fallen on hard times." Charlotte followed Emma's gaze. "Another hitchhiker or a tourist got stuck in town." "Maybe. I think he hasn't eaten in a while." Charlotte hesitated, her gaze lingering on the man. Then she shrugged. "We can't give away meals for free all the time. But if you feel strongly, we'll figure something out." Emma nodded appreciatively. She grabbed a steaming cup of coffee, added a dash of cream, and placed it on a tray with a small plate of fresh baked bread. Then she carried it back to the stranger's booth. "I figured you might want something warm," she said, setting the items in front of him. He looked at the offering with a mix of surprise and relief. His lips parted as though he wanted to protest, but his hunger got the best of him. "Thank you," he whispered, eyes growing moist. He took a sip of the coffee, and Emma saw tears form at the corners of his eyes. It was such a simple gesture, coffee and bread, but to him at that moment, it felt like a lifeline. She offered a reassuring smile, hoping to calm whatever storm brewed inside him. "I'm Emma, by the way," she said, softly. "If you need anything else, just let me know." The man swallowed hard, then nodded. "Thank you, Emma. My name's Jacob. Jacob Henderson." Emma's mind flashed with curiosity. Jacob Henderson, a name she didn't recognize. Perhaps he was new in town, or just passing through. Still, she decided not to pry. She sensed the weight of his silence, and pressing him for details could risk turning his fragile trust into retreat. Jacob stared at the steaming coffee and fresh bread, as though he'd never appreciated such simple nourishment as much as he did now. Emma lingered for a moment longer, noticing his trembling hands becoming steadier with each sip. Then, with a gentle nod, she left him to eat in peace. She had no idea that Jacob Henderson was more than he appeared, and that her small kindness would have ripple effects that would extend far beyond the walls of Bethany's diner, changing both their lives in ways neither could yet imagine. The following morning, Emma arrived at the diner for the early shift. She half expected to see the mysterious Jacob Henderson curled up in the corner booth again, but it was empty except for crumbs from a late-night customer. The day unfolded as usual, with regulars trickling in for coffee and bacon and egg breakfasts. Linda Thompson came by for her usual herbal tea, while the Jenkins couple shared their daily waffle. Emma found herself occasionally glancing at the door, wondering if Jacob would return. At around 10 o'clock, during the mid-morning lull, she saw him through the diner's large front window. He stood on the sidewalk, gazing at the help-wanted sign taped to the glass. He hadn't entered yet, as if summoning the courage to cross the threshold. Emma took a deep breath and moved toward the entrance. Just as she reached it, Jacob pushed the door open, gently stepping inside. He wore the same jacket, but it appeared slightly cleaner, as if he had spent the night scrubbing away the mud stains. His eyes flickered with both uncertainty and a faint spark of resolve. Emma offered him a friendly wave. "Morning," she greeted him. "It's nice to see you again." Jacob nodded and smiled, though his smile was thin with exhaustion. "Morning, Emma. He glanced toward the Help Wanted sign. "Is that position still open?" Emma felt a surge of warmth in her chest. Maybe he was trying to get back on his feet. She knew Charlotte had been talking about needing a part-time dishwasher or an extra server. "It is," she replied. "Would you like to fill out an application?" Jacob's gaze lingered on the floor. "Yes, I'd appreciate that." She led him to a small table in the back near the kitchen door, where the diner kept spare applications and a jar of pens. He sat down, carefully smoothing out the creases on the application form. As he began to fill in his personal information, Emma discreetly watched him. His handwriting was neat, deliberate. He paused over questions like his address and phone number, eventually scribbling something that Emma suspected might not be fully accurate. While he was busy, Charlotte emerged from the back office, sipping her coffee. She noticed Jacob with the application and raised an eyebrow. Emma took the opportunity to approach her. "This is Jacob," Emma said, softly, as if not wanting to disturb him. "He's the man I told you about yesterday. He's looking for a job." Charlotte studied him from a distance. "Well, we do need the help. But are you sure we can trust him? You said he was down on his luck." Emma felt a pang of frustration. Charlotte wasn't cruel. She was just cautious. Business at the diner had been tenuous for a while, and they couldn't afford to take on someone who might cause problems. "I don't know his full story," Emma admitted. "But he seems genuine, and he's clearly eager." Charlotte nodded slowly. "Let's talk to him. We'll see." After a few more minutes, Jacob approached the two women, handing over the completed application. Charlotte opened the folded paper, scanning it with mild curiosity. "Jacob Henderson," she read aloud. "No local address. References?" He shrugged apologetically. "I've been traveling for a while, so I don't have any current references. But I'm a hard worker, I promise." Charlotte pursed her lips. "We need someone for dishwashing and maybe some light prep work. The shift starts early morning and ends mid-afternoon. Pay is hourly minimum wage, plus any tips employees pool together. It's not much, but it's honest work." Jacob's mouth lifted in a small smile. "I'm more than willing to do anything. Thank you." Charlotte exchanged a quick glance with Emma, who gave a subtle nod of encouragement. Finally, Charlotte turned back to Jacob and said, "Let's give it a trial run. Start tomorrow at 6 a.m. sharp, and we'll see how it goes for a couple of weeks." Jacob's eyes shimmered with relief. "Thank you so much," he said, gripping the edge of the form as if it were the key to a new life. "I won't let you down." When he left a short while later, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had played a small part in offering someone a fresh start, even if only a temporary one. Yet a question tugged at her mind. Where was Jacob staying, and how had he ended up wandering into Willowdale in the first place? She resolved not to push him too hard for answers he would share, if and when he was ready. That night, Jacob slept in his car in the parking lot of a nearby abandoned warehouse. He reclined the driver's seat as far back as it would go and covered himself with the same worn jacket. The coastal air was cold, making his breath visible in faint puffs under the dim streetlight. He could have afforded a small motel if he'd truly been who he claimed to be, but secrecy was paramount in his plan. He was no ordinary man struggling through life. He was a millionaire named Jacob Henderson, heir to an expansive real estate empire that spanned multiple states. Yet his father's passing had unleashed a storm of complicated family dynamics, and Jacob had lost faith in people's intentions. He needed to find someone sincere, someone who wouldn't be swayed by the weight of his wallet. And in Emma Lawrence, he had glimpsed the spark of genuine kindness. But would that kindness remain once she learned who he really was? That was the question that haunted him. He recalled the countless people he'd encountered in high society circles. They played the role of confidants or even lovers, but their loyalty always came with an unspoken price tag. If he wanted honesty, he would have to hide his wealth, become someone unremarkable, and see who would treat him with decency. So he meticulously orchestrated this ruse, dressing down Sleeping Rough and walking into Bethany's diner as if he owned nothing more than the clothes on his back. Jacob knew the risk. If Emma or Charlotte or anyone in Willowdale found out he was actually wealthy, the authenticity of their kindness could be called into question. Every gesture would feel tainted by the suspicion that it was motivated by greed. He stared up at the starless sky, the distant hum of the ocean lapping at the shore, hoping he had made the right choice. Yes, it was a deception, but in his heart he believed it was necessary. He wanted to see who would help him without expecting anything in return. The wind picked up, and Jacob pulled his jacket tighter. As he drifted into a restless sleep, he wondered how he would maintain this charade. There were practical matters to consider: where to shower, how to afford small daily necessities. If everything went well at the diner, he'd have some income to keep up appearances. And more importantly, he'd have an opportunity to study people in this humble town. Would Emma's kindness endure? Would Charlotte's cautious acceptance harden or soften over time? Only the coming weeks would reveal the answers Jacob so desperately sought. The next morning, Jacob arrived at the diner before sunrise. The air was thick with early morning fog that draped Willowdale in a shroud of grey. He wore the same jacket, but his face was freshly scrubbed, and his hair, though still slightly unkempt, was combed back. Emma was already inside, helping Charlotte set up tables and preparing the coffee station for the day's first customers. "You're early," Emma said, flashing him a bright smile as he stepped into the warm interior. "That's a good sign." Jacob shrugged, attempting modesty. "I didn't want to be late on my first day." "Where should I start?" Charlotte handed him an apron. "Dishes first. We had some extra plates from last night's closing shift that weren't finished. Everything's in the sink. After that, you can help Emma with refilling salt shakers and wiping tables." Jacob nodded. He disappeared into the kitchen and found a towering stack of plates, bowls, and utensils. The kitchen was a cacophony of sizzling grills and clanging pots. The head cook, an older woman named Gloria Evans, gave him a perfunctory glance before returning to flipping pancakes. Without complaint, Jacob rolled up his sleeves and got to work. The scalding water stung his hands as he scrubbed stubborn grease from frying pans and wiped away traces of tomato sauce from plates. He worked diligently, determined to prove his worth. Steam rose around him, fogging his glasses. Cheap reading glasses he'd purchased at a drugstore to bolster his disguise. Despite the mundane nature of dishwashing, Jacob found a surprising sense of satisfaction in doing honest labor. It was far from the high-stakes board meetings or charity galas he was accustomed to, but it grounded him. Whenever Emma passed by the kitchen door, she'd peek in to check on him. Once she noticed him struggling with a stubborn skillet. Slipping on a pair of gloves, she joined him, demonstrating a trick with hot water and a dash of baking soda. Soon the burnt residue lifted off. "Thanks," Jacob murmured, feeling a twinge of self-consciousness. "No problem," she replied, her voice light. "You're doing great." 2 hours later, after the breakfast rush began, Jacob emerged from the kitchen, drying his hands. He spotted Emma bustling between tables, balancing 3 plates on one arm. The diner was alive with chatter retirees catching up on local gossip, fishermen grabbing a hot meal before heading out to sea, and a few tourists who had stumbled in on their drive through the region. Emma gestured for Jacob to help her. He stepped forward, refilling coffee cups, handing out napkins, and clearing empty plates with as much efficiency as he could muster. It was hectic, but he maintained a polite smile, nodding at the customers who gave him curious glances. At one table sat Dr. Alan Kim, the local physician. "Haven't seen you around before," Dr. Kim remarked, adjusting his glasses as he glanced up at Jacob. "You new in town?" Jacob tensed momentarily, but forced himself to relax. "Yes, sir. Just arrived recently looking for work." Dr. Kim's expression was friendly. "Welcome, Willowdale could use some new faces. The young folks keep leaving for the city." Jacob nodded, offering a polite smile. He couldn't help but notice Emma watching him from a distance, likely making sure he was comfortable. This small exchange of words reassured him that not everyone in Willowdale would pry too deeply or make him feel like an outsider. By midday, the breakfast rush subsided, giving Jacob a chance to catch his breath. Emma was restocking condiments, so he decided to help. Side by side, they placed salt, pepper, and ketchup bottles on the tables, wiping away any crumbs left behind. "Are you settling in okay?" Emma asked, her tone gentle. "I know it's only the first day, but how does it feel?" Jacob paused. "It's different from what I'm used to," he said honestly. "But I like the pace here, and the people are friendly, especially you." Emma's cheeks reddened slightly. "Well, I just believe everyone deserves a fair shot." Her words ignited a surge of gratitude in Jacob. He felt a pang of guilt, too. He was deceiving her about who he really was. But he reminded himself why he was doing it, to truly see the heart beneath the kindness. Just then Charlotte appeared with a mild frown. Jacob, a table by the window, just left. They complained the ketchup bottle was sticky. "Could you wipe down the table more thoroughly next time? We can't have any slip-ups." Jacob apologized immediately. "Yes, of course. Sorry about that." Though Charlotte's tone was a bit sharp, Jacob understood she had to maintain standards. The diner's reputation depended on consistent quality, and he intended to uphold that. Throughout the day, he learned the diner's unwritten rules, how Gloria liked the dishes arranged when it was acceptable to take a quick break, and which customers needed extra patience. By closing time, his arms ached from the carrying dishes and scrubbing surfaces, yet a strange warmth spread through him. He was part of a team, no matter how temporary or superficial that might be. As the shift ended, Emma pulled him aside. "Hey, I don't want to intrude," she began, her eyes flicking to the side. "But do you have a place to stay tonight?" Jacob stiffened, trying to mask his surprise. "I'll manage," he said, giving her a small smile. "I appreciate the concern." Emma bit her lower lip, wrestling with the idea of pushing further, but she saw the resolve in his eyes. "Okay," she relented. "But if you need anything, just let me know." He nodded, touched by her offer. Turning away, Emma returned to wiping down the last few tables. Jacob took off his apron, folded it neatly, and handed it to Charlotte, who was counting the register. She paused to look at him. "You did fine today," she said in a neutral tone. "We'll see you tomorrow, bright and early." Jacob walked out into the cool evening air. The sky was streaked with vibrant oranges and purples, a final display of color before night fully set in. He got into his old sedan, a car that still ran well enough, but looked as nondescript and battered as the rest of his disguise, and drove to the edge of town. There, among a few dilapidated buildings, he found the same deserted lot where he'd slept before. Sitting alone in the car, he unwrapped a sandwich Emma had slipped into his hands before he left. "You'll need some dinner," she had said in a hushed tone. He had no chance to thank her properly, but the memory of her caring expression stayed with him. He took a bite, the taste of fresh bread and savory ham filling his mouth. On any other day in his previous life, he might have considered a simple sandwich too humble for dinner. But now it felt like a feast. He realized with a bittersweet sense of clarity that he had never before felt such profound gratitude for so little. With each passing hour, Jacob grew more convinced that Willowdale was the perfect setting for the test he had designed. Emma, in particular, stood out like a beam of light. For the first time in his life, Jacob sensed he had found someone whose decency transcended superficial judgments. Whether or not her kindness could endure all obstacles was yet to be seen, but a seed of hope was planted in his heart. Little did he know the trials that lay ahead, how circumstances would soon take a turn, forcing him to confront both internal and external storms. If he thought this was just about quietly observing humanity's better nature, he was in for a surprise. Life had a way of rewriting even the best-laid plans. Over the following 2 weeks, Jacob settled into his routine at Bethany's diner. Every morning at 6 o'clock, he showed up in his worn jacket, quietly doing dishes, refilling coffee, and mopping floors at closing time. He earned modest wages enough to fill his gas tank and afford basic necessities, while still maintaining the facade of poverty. Emma continued to show him kindness in small but meaningful ways, offering him fresh pastries that hadn't sold, refilling his coffee mug during breaks, and engaging him in friendly conversation. She also shared bits and pieces of her own life. Emma had grown up in Willowdale, the only child of a single mother who worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. Now her mother lived in a small house on the east side of town, dealing with arthritis in her hands. Emma occasionally helped her pay the bills. Despite financial struggles, Emma always seemed to have an upbeat spirit, greeting every customer as if they were an old friend. Jacob watched her closely, trying to discern any sign that her friendliness was driven by ulterior motives. But Emma never asked about his past, never hinted at wanting anything in return. She simply treated him as a fellow human being, deserving of respect. Then came a day that tested the mettle of everyone at the diner. It was a stormy Saturday afternoon. Dark clouds rolled in from the sea, and gusty winds rattled the diner's windows. Rain poured in torrents, turning the streets into minor canals. Willowdale was used to tough weather, but this storm felt particularly menacing. Around noon, a surge of customers dashed in from the downpour, dripping umbrellas and soaked jackets. The diner filled rapidly, every table occupied with people seeking shelter and a hot meal. Jacob hustled to keep up cleaning tables as soon as a customer left, only to see a new customer seated within seconds. Emma moved swiftly between the kitchen and the dining area, balancing plates and cups with practiced grace. Even Charlotte pitched in, refilling coffee pots and taking orders. At one point, the lights flickered ominously. The hum of conversation hushed for a moment, as though everyone held their breath, awaiting a possible power outage. The lights stabilized, but the tension remained. In the midst of this chaos, a frazzled woman burst through the door. She was short, with curly brown hair, plastered to her scalp by the rain. She clutched a sobbing toddler to her hip and dragged a suitcase behind her. Her face was etched with distress, her eyes darting around as if searching desperately for someone to help her. Emma hurried over. "Ma'am, are you all right?" The woman managed to catch her breath. "My car broke down about a mile from here." She gasped. "I walked in the rain with my daughter." I don't know anyone here." She then turned to the toddler, who wailed louder, her cheeks bright red from crying. Emma quickly guided them to a small side table near the kitchen, away from the draft near the door. "Let me get you something warm," she offered, her voice soothing. The woman nodded, shakily, tears mixing with raindrops. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm Melanie. This is my daughter, Lily." Emma ran into the kitchen, emerging moments later with a mug of hot chocolate and a small cup of warm milk for Lily. Meanwhile, Jacob approached, noticing the woman's chattering teeth. He quickly grabbed a couple of clean dish rags from the kitchen and offered them so she could dry herself and Lily as best she could. "Here you go," Jacob said quietly, draping a towel over the child's small shoulders. Lily blinked at him, still sobbing, but with slightly less intensity. Melanie looked up at Jacob, relief flooding her eyes. "Thank you. God, this is such a nightmare. My phone's battery died." "I can't call for help." Jacob glanced at Emma, who was already digging her own phone from her apron pocket. "Do you have someone we can call for you?" Emma asked gently. Melanie shook her head. "I was on my way to see my sister in the next town, but she's out of state right now. I don't know what to do." Charlotte, who had observed the situation from behind the counter, approached. "We can try to call a tow truck, but in this weather, it might be a while." A hush fell over the group as the storm intensified. Rain drummed against the roof, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Melanie's face crumpled, and Lily's cries escalated once more. Without thinking, Emma wrapped her arms around the child, humming softly in an attempt to calm her. Lily leaned into Emma's warmth. Jacob glanced out the window at the sheets of rain that battered the street. He imagined Melanie trudging through that storm, towing a suitcase and a child. His chest tightened with empathy. Though the diner was crowded, no one offered more than a sympathetic look. Yet Emma and Charlotte had quickly mobilized to help. They had no obligation to fix this stranger's problems, but they were doing all they could, just as Emma had done for Jacob. Then he spoke up. "I can drive out there," he offered. "Maybe I can help with the car, or at least get your belongings." Melanie's eyes lit up with hope. "Would you really?" "Oh, thank you." But her expression fell. "The engine just died. I doubt it's a simple fix." "Still," Jacob insisted, "maybe there's something I can do. Or at least I can get your suitcase so you can have dry clothes." Charlotte chewed her lip, looking torn. "Jacob, the diner is slammed." "Are you sure?" Emma placed a hand on Charlotte's arm. "I can cover for him. I'll handle the tables until the next shift comes in." Charlotte hesitated, but then she saw the sincerity in both their faces. She sighed. "Fine, but be quick, and be careful." Jacob nodded. Grabbing his jacket, he looked at Emma, who gave him an encouraging smile. "Thank you," she mouthed silently, her eyes brimming with gratitude for his willingness to help. Moments later, Jacob stepped into the storm. The wind and rain whipped his face, soaking him instantly. He jogged to his car and turned on the engine. The windshield wipers struggled against the torrential downpour, but he managed to inch down the flooded streets. He hadn't admitted this to anyone, but he had a decent knowledge of cars. He'd spent weekends in his youth tinkering with old vehicles at his father's estate. It was one of the few times he and his father ever bonded. 10 minutes later, he spotted the abandoned sedan near the side of a desolate road. Water pooled around the tires, the engine hood still warm to the touch. Carefully, Jacob popped the hood water dripping down his forehead as he peered inside. It was dark, and the storm made it nearly impossible to see clearly, but he noticed a loose serpentine belt. The battery looked dead too. In these conditions, it was unlikely he could fix it on the spot. He grabbed Melanie's suitcase from the trunk, along with a small bag of groceries. The wind howled, pressing him backward as he hurried to his own car. Within minutes, he was on his way back to the diner, water sloshing beneath his tires. His heart pounded adrenaline, mixed with a growing sense of purpose. This was more than just testing the kindness of Willowdale's people. He was part of that kindness now. When Jacob returned, dripping wet, he found Melanie seated at the same small table. Lily was calmer, wrapped in a blanket Emma had found in the back storage. Emma was kneeling beside the child, reading a picture book in soft, lilting tones. Melanie's eyes went wide with relief as Jacob handed over the suitcase. "Oh, thank you," she breathed, her voice trembling with emotion. Jacob shrugged, trying to downplay his role. "No problem. The car might need more than a quick fix, but at least you have some dry clothes." Melanie clutched the suitcase to her chest, as though it were a priceless treasure. Emma excused herself to let Melanie and Lily change in the diner's restroom. By the time they emerged, Lily wore warm pajamas, and Melanie had swapped her drenched blouse for a cozy sweater. Feeling a strange but welcome sense of camaraderie, Jacob returned to his duties, helping Emma clear tables and serve the last straggling customers. The entire stormy ordeal reminded him of why he had come to Willowdale in the first place. Here was a microcosm of humanity's best qualities, shining through in Emma's generosity, Charlotte's reluctant yet real support, and the simple willingness of people to offer a helping hand. Little did he know that this was merely the beginning of a deepening bond, and that hidden forces both in his own past and in Willowdale's undercurrent would soon threaten everything. After the storm finally subsided, Willowdale returned to its calm pace. Word of Melanie's ordeal spread quickly. Locals at the diner told stories about the brave waitress and the mysterious new dishwasher who helped a stranded mother and child. Emma and Jacob, who were just doing what they felt was right, found themselves at the center of local chatter. Even Charlotte acknowledged it, albeit in her typical reserved way. "Customers are saying nice things about you both," she told them one morning. "Keep it up." Melanie and Lily temporarily lodged at a small inn near the diner, thanks to a neighborly discount from the inn's owner, Charles Beaumont. Charles was a widower in his 50s, always eager to lend a helping hand. Emma visited them during her break times, bringing extra pastries for Lily. Jacob, too, checked in to see if he could repair Melanie's car. He managed to do some minor fixes, but lacked the parts to replace the damaged belt. It would take a few days for a mechanic in the next town to order the part. During one such visit, as Jacob knelt by Melanie's car, tinkering with the engine in the inn's parking lot, Melanie quietly approached. She held a thermos of coffee, still hot, and offered it to him. "You've done so much," she said softly. "I wish I could repay you." Jacob took a sip of the coffee, savoring the warmth that cut through the crisp sea air. "No repayment necessary," he said. "I'm just glad I could help." A moment of silence passed. Then Melanie spoke again. "Are you new in town? Emma told me you started working at the diner recently." Jacob froze slightly, always wary of revealing too much about himself. "Yeah, I am. Just looking for a fresh start, I guess." Melanie nodded. "I understand that. Sometimes a new place can feel like a new beginning." The comment struck Jacob deeper than he expected. "Yeah," he said, forcing a small smile. "Sometimes we all need that." They spent a few more minutes chatting amiably about Willowdale, its friendly community, and even the diner's charm. Then Jacob excused himself, returning to the engine. He felt a pang of conflicting emotions. It was comforting to help others, but each kind act made him feel more like a fraud. Who was he to claim a fresh start while concealing a fortune and a tangled family drama? That evening after his shift, Jacob found himself sitting on a bench near the town's harbour. The ocean sparkled under the moonlight, and fishing boats bobbed gently in the water. He pulled out a battered notebook from his jacket. Inside were old letters, notes from his father's estate lawyers, and a few scribblings he'd made over the past weeks, detailing his thoughts on the people he'd met in Willowdale. He was searching for something authenticity, a sense of belonging, or proof that genuine kindness existed without the influence of money. He thought about Emma. She had been nothing short of compassionate, not just to him, but to every patron who walked into Bethany's diner. He recalled how she'd read that picture book to Lily, as if the child were her own. He wondered what life would be like if he set aside the deception and allowed himself to truly connect with people on honest terms. But could he trust them? Or would they change once they found out he had wealth? Jacob sighed, tucking the notebook away. He stared at the glimmering waters, letting the ocean's gentle roar soothe him. Tomorrow was another day at the diner. Tomorrow he'd see Emma's bright face once more. And tomorrow he'd continue this strange charade. For how much longer he wasn't sure. Jacob's presence in Willowdale did not go unnoticed beyond the diner. Another person who took a keen interest in him was the local journalist for the Willowdale Weekly, a man named Richard Caldwell. Richard was known for reporting on small-town happenings, everything from city council meetings to local bake-offs. But he also prided himself on uncovering hidden truths. One afternoon, Richard walked into Bethany's diner, greeted by Emma as usual. He sat at the counter, ordering a coffee and a slice of apple pie. While waiting, he casually observed Jacob carrying a tray of clean dishes from the back. Something about Jacob's demeanor piqued Richard's curiosity. Dressed humbly, yes, but there was a certain poise to him, a refined manner in how he carried himself. Richard turned to Emma, who was behind the counter. "So, Emma, that's your new co-worker?" He pointed subtly at Jacob. Emma nodded, giving Jacob a passing smile. "His name's Jacob. He's been a huge help around here." Richard swirled his coffee. "He from around these parts? I don't think so," Emma replied. "He just showed up a few weeks ago, needed a job. Charlotte hired him." Richard took a bite of pie, chewing thoughtfully. "Interesting. Might do a little piece in the paper about him and how he helped that stranded woman. A nice human interest story." Emma brightened. "That would be lovely. I'm sure he'd appreciate it." A few days later, Richard made a point to approach Jacob directly. He found him outside the diner after closing, leaning against his beat-up sedan, rummaging for his keys. "Jacob Henderson." "Right?" Richard asked politely, stepping closer. Jacob looked up, startled. He recognized Richard from inside the diner, but didn't expect him to strike up a conversation. "Yeah. How can I help you?" Richard offered a friendly smile. Richard Caldwell, Willowdale. "Weekly. I was thinking of writing a short article about the good deed you did during the storm helping Melanie and Lily." Jacob's stomach lurched. The last thing he wanted was media attention, even if it was a small-town paper. It was nothing he said, forcing a casual chuckle. "I'm not really looking for any publicity." Richard tilted his head, as if studying him. "I understand. Not everyone wants a spotlight. But if you change your mind, it could be a nice way to get recognized. Plus, the community loves reading feel-good stories." Jacob maintained a polite facade. "I'll think about it. Thanks for the offer." He swiftly opened his car door and slid inside before Richard could probe further. Later that evening, Richard sat at his desk, a single lamp illuminating the swirling dust motes in his modest office. He typed Jacob's name into a search engine on his computer, just out of curiosity to see if anything interesting turned up. Willowdale's internet was spotty, but soon he found himself sifting through social media profiles, business articles, and public records. His interest was piqued by a mention of a Jacob Henderson associated with Henderson Real Estate Holdings, a major firm in a neighboring state. But that Jacob Henderson was rumored to be an heir to a multi-million-dollar empire, certainly not the dishwasher living in Willowdale. Yet the pictures, though few, bore a vague resemblance. Same color hair, similar facial structure, though the Jacob Henderson in the articles dressed in tailored suits and carried himself with unmistakable confidence. Could it be the same person? Richard's journalistic instincts tingled. He decided to file the information away, not jumping to any conclusions yet. A week later, the diner bustled with the usual lunchtime crowd. Jacob worked the register, while Emma served tables. Charlotte oversaw the operation, occasionally reminding Jacob to smile at customers. All seemed well, until a man in an expensive-looking suit strolled in, immediately drawing the attention of those around him. He carried a sleek briefcase, his shoes polished to perfection. He didn't look like a local or a typical tourist. Jacob, occupied with the register, didn't notice the newcomer at first, but the man cleared his throat, calling for service. Emma stepped up. "Welcome to Bethany's Diner. How can I—" The man's eyes slid past Emma, resting on Jacob at the register. His lips curved in a sardonic smile. "Jacob Henderson," he said loud enough for several customers to hear. "Fancy seeing you here." Emma blinked, confused. Jacob finally looked up, feeling his blood run cold. He recognized the voice immediately. It was Andrew Cartwright, a lawyer who had once worked with the Henderson family's legal team. Andrew was cunning, always looking for a way to ingratiate himself with the wealthy or gain a foothold in someone else's fortune. Jacob forced a neutral expression. "Andrew, what brings you to Willowdale?" Andrew placed his briefcase on the counter, ignoring Emma's attempts to seat him. "Business," he replied cryptically. "I had no idea I'd find you hiding in this charming little diner." Emma's eyes darted between the two men, confusion etched on her face. "You two know each other?" Andrew laughed. "Know each other? We've done business together for years. Jacob here is—" Jacob held up a hand, stopping Andrew mid-sentence. Panic flared in his chest. If Andrew revealed his identity, his entire test would be ruined. Everything he'd built with Emma, the trust, the closeness, would be overshadowed by suspicion and confusion. Andrew arched an eyebrow. Keeping secrets, are we? The tension was palpable. Emma could sense it. Charlotte, too, watched from the kitchen door, eyebrows knitted in concern. Andrew shrugged, a predatory glint in his eyes. "No matter. Perhaps we can speak later in private." He turned to Emma with a rehearsed smile. "Forgive me for any disruption. A table for one, please." Emma led Andrew to a booth near the window. Jacob had no choice but to continue working, though his hands trembled slightly as he rang up another customer. His mind raced. How had Andrew found him? What did he want? There was only one reason Andrew could be here: to pressure Jacob about the family inheritance, or to glean some advantage that might benefit him in the corporate realm. Across the diner, Andrew ordered a simple cup of coffee. Emma, curious but professional, served him. Andrew made small talk, praising the diner's aesthetic, but occasionally glanced in Jacob's direction. She picked up on his subtle digs about how someone of Jacob's caliber deserved better than dishwashing, or how interesting it is for a man of means to bury himself in a small town. Though Emma tried to keep her face neutral, every new statement from Andrew cranked her curiosity higher. Was Jacob more than he claimed to be? She thought about his refined mannerisms, his reluctance to talk about his past, the fact that he always seemed to carry himself with a quiet confidence, despite living so modestly. When Andrew finally left, dropping an absurdly large tip on the table, the entire diner seemed to exhale. Jacob avoided Emma's gaze as he cleaned the counter, but he knew the questions were coming. Sure enough, as soon as the last customer cleared out, Emma approached. "Jacob," she said softly, "do you want to tell me what that was about?" He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her concern. "He's someone I used to work for." Jacob lied, hating himself for the deception. "We had a falling out. He must have tracked me down." Emma studied his face, searching his eyes for truth. "He called you Jacob Henderson. He acted like you're someone important." Jacob forced a weak chuckle. "That's my real name. I never lied about that. But the rest? It's complicated." Emma's expression softened, but confusion still lingered. "I won't pry. Just let me know if there's trouble." "Okay, I don't want you to get hurt." Jacob nodded, relief and guilt tangling in his chest. "Thank you. But I'm fine." Yet even as he said the words, he knew he wasn't fine at all. This was the moment he'd feared someone from his old life intruding into the fragile new world he was building, and the cracks in his deception were starting to show. Would Emma stand by him once she learned the truth? Or would everything come crashing down? 2 days after Andrew's unsettling visit, the tension in the diner hung thick. Emma tried to pretend everything was normal, but she could feel Jacob's inner turmoil. His hands shook whenever he handled plates, and the haunted look in his eyes never really left. Even Charlotte noticed giving Jacob more breaks and fewer front-of-house duties to keep him out of the public eye. One afternoon, when the crowd was light, Emma found Jacob alone in the storage room, slumped on a crate of canned tomatoes. His head was in his hands, and he looked utterly defeated. "Hey," she said softly, stepping closer. "What's going on?" "You've been a wreck since that Andrew guy showed up." Jacob slowly looked up, eyes red-rimmed from stress. Part of him wanted to spill everything to tell her about his family's empire, about the ruse he'd orchestrated, about how he'd fallen for the kindness in Willowdale, especially hers. But fear paralyzed him. If he told the truth, would she feel used, betrayed? "It's complicated," he finally said, voice barely above a whisper. "I wish I could explain." But Emma knelt beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Jacob, I don't know your story, but I can see you're suffering. If you need help, or just someone to listen, I'm here. No judgment." Her unwavering support pounded at his conscience. He swallowed, feeling tears threaten to escape. You're too kind to me," he muttered, unsteady. "After everything, you deserve the truth." Emma tilted her head, concern etched in her features. "What do you mean?" Jacob took a shuddering breath. He was on the brink of revealing his secret. But before he could say another word, Charlotte's voice echoed through the storage room. "Emma, we need you out front. A customer's complaining about a missing wallet." Emma squeezed Jacob's shoulder gently. "We'll talk later. Okay?" He nodded, exhaling shakily. The moment slipped away, replaced by urgent diner matters. Emma hurried out, leaving Jacob alone with his swirling guilt. That evening, just as the diner closed, Andrew Cartwright returned this time, with a smug grin that told Jacob he was up to no good. Emma had already left, as it was her early shift, but Charlotte was still there, counting the till. "Hello again," Andrew said smoothly, leaning on the counter. "I believe you and I should chat." Jacob gave Charlotte a pointed look. She caught his meaning and retired to the back office, leaving them some space. Once alone, Andrew wasted no time. "Jacob, I have some documents here." Andrew began tapping his briefcase. "Your father's estate is in the midst of a meltdown. The board is panicking. Your half-brother is calling the shots, and frankly, people are starting to wonder where you are." Jacob's jaw clenched. "I'm out. I have no interest in boardroom politics." Andrew nodded, feigning sympathy. "Ah, yes, I recall your vow to avoid the family drama. But your absence is costing you money, my friend, millions potentially. And once the inheritance is fully allocated, you might be left with scraps." Jacob folded his arms. "I don't care about the money." Andrew chuckled darkly. "Right. Which is why you're flipping burgers at a small-town diner. Please. The Jacob I knew would never stoop to this level unless there was a reason." He arched a brow. "Are you testing something or someone?" Jacob remained silent, hating how easily Andrew saw through him. Andrew leaned closer. "You can't hide forever. If you won't come back willingly, your brother might drag you into court, claiming you're mentally unfit to handle the inheritance. Then you lose everything on his terms." Jacob felt his anger flare. "That's ridiculous. Is it? You're here playing pauper. It won't look good in front of a judge, especially if I testify that you're mentally unstable." Jacob's hand clenched into a fist, but he forced himself to remain composed. "What do you want?" Andrew shrugged, casually. "Your brother wants to see you. Sort things out. He's in the city next week. He's expecting you." Jacob ground his teeth. "I'll think about it." Andrew gave him a twisted grin. "Very well. But hurry. The clock's ticking, and once I report back that you're dithering in Willowdale, the board won't be sympathetic." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and do me a favor if you're trying to keep your identity hidden. Maybe don't let your eyes linger too long on that sweet waitress. People notice these things." With that final jab, Andrew walked out into the night. Jacob stood there, heart-hammering rage and shame mingling in his chest. He was trapped. If he returned to the city, he'd be swallowed by the corporate machine he despised. If he stayed, he risked losing everything anyway, as Andrew threatened to sabotage him. And looming over all of it was Emma, her kindness, her gentle presence. The thought of telling her the whole truth both thrilled and terrified him. Charlotte emerged from the office. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly, though the worry in her voice suggested she already knew the answer. Jacob forced a nod. "Yeah, I have to take care of some personal business. Might need a few days off." Charlotte studied him. Though often stern, she had a keen sense of empathy when it mattered most. "Take whatever time you need," she said. "I'll keep your job open for you." Jacob thanked her and left, driving aimlessly around Willowdale until he found himself at the harbour once more. The moon hung low in the sky, painting silver trails across the restless water. He parked and stepped onto the pier, leaning against the railing as the wind tousled his hair. He felt suffocated by the weight of indecision. Footsteps tapped behind him. He turned to see Emma's hands shoved into her sweater's pockets. She looked surprised to find him there. Jacob. He forced a small smile. Emma. I thought you went home. I did, but then I went for a walk. I needed some air. She paused, her eyes filled with curiosity and concern. I saw your car, and I just had to see if you were okay. He lowered his gaze to the dark water. I'm not really. There's a lot going on. She stepped closer, resting a hand on his arm. Let me help. I know there's something you're not telling me, and that's okay. But you don't have to carry it alone. The sincerity in her voice nearly broke him. In that moment, he wanted to confess everything, who he was. Why he was here, how her kindness had filled a void he never knew existed. But then he remembered Andrew's threat, the inheritance, the possibility that everything could come crashing down in an instant. His eyes brimmed with tears. I'm leaving Willowdale for a bit, he managed to say. Family issues. But I'll come back. I promise. Emma's grip on his arm tightened. Jacob, you don't have to go alone. If there's anything... He forced a step back, tears slipping free. I'm sorry, he whispered. For everything. And before she could say another word, he hurried away, leaving her standing on the pier under the moonlight, her eyes filled with questions he couldn't yet answer. Jacob drove through the night, heading toward the city he once called home. It was a sprawling metropolis of glass skyscrapers and bumper-to-bumper traffic. Even at 2 a.m., the downtown streets glowed with neon signs and headlights. He felt out of place in his battered sedan, wearing his worn jacket. At the Henderson Enterprises building, doormen eyed him suspiciously until he flashed a security card he still carried. He took the elevator to the 28th floor, stepping into a sleek reception area guarded by tinted glass walls. A night shift receptionist, startled by his arrival, informed him that his half-brother Peter Henderson was in the penthouse suite. So Jacob rode another elevator to the top floor, memories swirling as he pressed the button labeled PH. The doors opened to a luxury foyer, marble floors, reflecting the glow of modern chandeliers. Peter, clad in a tailored suit, stood by the window overlooking the city's twinkling skyline. He spun around, feigning surprise. Jacob, you're here. Jacob's stomach churned at the sight of his half-brother. They shared a father, but had never truly been close. Peter exuded an aura of controlled ambition, someone used to bending people and circumstances to his will. Andrew told me you wanted to talk, Jacob said, keeping his voice cold. Peter gestured to a sleek leather chair. Sit. Can I offer you a drink? Jacob declined, crossing his arms. I'd rather we get to the point. Peter smirked. Very well. He paused, sighing dramatically. Father's estate is in the final stages of distribution. As you're aware, you stand to inherit a sizable share, enough to influence company decisions, enough to... I don't want to influence anything, Jacob interrupted. I never have. Peter's eyes narrowed. That's precisely the issue. You're an absentee heir. Meanwhile, I've been overseeing daily operations, forging partnerships, expanding our holdings. The board needs assurance that the family is united. Your portion of shares is crucial for maintaining a controlling interest. If you bail, or if you're deemed incompetent, we risk a hostile takeover. Jacob nearly laughed. He was a dishwasher in a small town living incognito, so hearing corporate jargon about controlling interests felt surreal. I don't care about controlling interest, but I also won't let you manipulate me. Peter's smirk deepened. Oh, Jacob, you've always been too sentimental. You want to see the good in people to test them like some vigilante saint. But the real world doesn't work that way. We have to maintain power, or we lose it. Jacob's fists clenched. I'm only here because Andrew threatened to smear my name, claiming I'm mentally unfit. Peter shrugged. Because you're off playing pauper. Yes, it does look quite erratic to outsiders. Who else knows about my whereabouts? Peter waved a dismissive hand. Just Andrew and me, as far as I'm aware. We've kept it quiet. But rumors could leak. Jacob's thoughts turned to Emma. He imagined headlines that would paint him as a deranged millionaire posing as a dishwasher. The betrayal she would feel if she learned the truth through tabloids or corporate drama rather than from him. Peter strolled closer, voice low and persuasive. Look, we have a simple solution. Sign over your voting rights to me. You'll still inherit your share of the profits enough to live comfortably anywhere. You can return to your little experiment. His lips curled in distaste at the word. And no one will bother you. No lawsuits, no mental evaluations. Everyone wins. Jacob shook his head. You want complete control. Peter shrugged. Yes, I do. And you want to be left alone. So sign. He produced a slim folder from a nearby desk and handed Jacob a fountain pen. Take it. I won't rush you. Think about it overnight. If you don't sign, I can't guarantee your secrecy. Silence thickened to the air. Jacob took the folder, scanning the legal jargon. He was no stranger to the complexities of corporate law, having grown up in the shadow of his father's empire. The contract basically relinquished his voting power, while still granting him the financial benefits. It was exactly the type of clean, manipulative trick he'd expect from Peter. I'll think about it, he mumbled. He tucked the folder under his arm, turning to leave. Peter's voice stopped him at the door. You're playing a risky game, Jacob. You might believe in the goodness of people, but that can't shield you from reality. Jacob glanced back, a surge of defiance rising. Sometimes goodness is enough. Peter's mocking laughter echoed as Jacob stepped into the elevator. Heart pounding with anger, confusion, and the faint flicker of hope that Emma represented. Could her kindness truly withstand the truth about who he was? That night, Jacob checked into a modest hotel outside the downtown core. Sleep eluded him. He flipped through the contract repeatedly, each time feeling nauseated by the carefully crafted terms. He could sign and slip back into Willowdale, unnoticed, continuing his test, but at what cost? He would be enabling Peter's corporate ambitions, letting his half-brother hold all the power. As the hours passed, a realization settled in. This wasn't just about controlling shares or an inheritance. It was about the kind of person Jacob wanted to be. Did he want to run from the truth, forever wearing a disguise? Or should he stand up, reveal himself, and see who stuck around? By dawn, he made his decision. He scribbled his signature on the contract's final page. But before he did, he made one small, crucial modification to a clause about the distribution timeline. It was a subtle change likely to slip under the radar unless thoroughly scrutinized. He hoped it might buy him time to rectify the situation later, if needed. He didn't trust Peter. But at the same time, Jacob was desperate to keep Willowdale separate from this corporate battlefield, and Emma he couldn't bear to drag her into a legal scandal. Not yet. Not until he was ready to tell her everything face to face. By mid-afternoon, Jacob drove back to Willowdale, exhaustion lining his features. The tension weighed heavily as he parked behind the diner. He stepped inside, relief washing over him, at the familiar scent of coffee and sizzling bacon. Charlotte was there, wiping the counter, glancing up with mild surprise. "You came back," she said, simply. Jacob nodded. "Family issues are sort of handled." She gave a curt nod, not prying further. "We've been short-staffed for lunch. You ready to work?" Without hesitation, he grabbed an apron. "Yes." For the next few hours, he immersed himself in the daily hustle, taking orders, washing dishes, refilling salt shakers. Anything to quell his racing mind. He was stacking plates by the sink when Emma walked in from the back storage room, eyes lighting up with relief at the sight of him. "Jacob." "You're here," she exclaimed. "I was worried." He forced a small, tired grin. "I'm okay. Sorry if I scared you. Just had to deal with some things." Emma approached, lowering her voice. "Is everything all right now?" Jacob paused, then gave a slow nod. "It's better. Thank you for caring." Her eyes softened. "That's what friends do." "Friends?" He echoed the word, tinged with both warmth and regret. They stood in a quiet corner of the kitchen, steam rising from the dishwasher, carrying the aroma of soap and hot water. Jacob inhaled, gathering courage. He reached out gently, brushing Emma's arm with his fingertips. "Listen, I need to tell you something important. Soon. But not here, not now." Emma searched his expression. She saw sincerity etched in his eyes and gave a slow nod. "Whenever you're ready, Jacob. I'll be here." His heart thudded. He hoped that when the truth came out, she would still stand beside him. For all his wealth, Emma's acceptance mattered more than any inheritance ever could. A few nights later, Willowdale was cloaked in the stillness of late evening. The diner had closed hours ago, and Emma was just finishing her final cleanup tasks before heading home. Jacob lingered near the back door, waiting. He'd asked her earlier if they could talk privately, and she'd agreed, though a flicker of nervous anticipation danced in her eyes. When the last of the fluorescent lights clicked off, Emma locked the front entrance. She found Jacob outside, leaning against the weathered brick wall. The moon cast pale light across the deserted street. "Shall we walk?" he asked quietly. Emma nodded, hugging her cardigan close as a breeze rustled through the coastal night air. They strolled past darkened storefronts and quiet homes until they reached the edge of the beach. A wooden boardwalk stretched out, overlooking the gentle waves that glimmered under the moonlight. They walked side by side for a while, neither speaking. Finally, Emma couldn't bear the silence any longer. "Jacob, you're scaring me," she said, voice trembling slightly. "Whatever it is, just say it." He stopped, turning to face her. The hush of the ocean underscored the gravity of the moment. "I owe you an explanation," he began, voice low. "About who I really am. About Andrew, about my family. About everything." Emma's eyes flickered with apprehension. "Okay." Jacob swallowed, adrenaline pumping. "I'm not who you think I am. I'm not just a drifter looking for work. My full name is Jacob Henderson, heir to the Henderson real estate empire. My father passed away a year ago, leaving me a huge inheritance and shares in the company. I walked away because I couldn't stand how people treated me once they knew I had money. I needed to see if there were folks out there who'd be kind without knowing I was wealthy." The blood drained from Emma's face. She stared at him, lips parted in disbelief. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen. Then she let out a shaky breath. "Jacob, you're saying you're a millionaire?" He winced at the word. "Technically, yes. Probably more. But I haven't touched most of it. I came to Willowdale to test something human decency, I guess, to see if someone could like me. For me, not for my bank account. She stepped back, the ocean breeze toying with strands of her hair. So, all this time you were lying to me. I never lied about my name, he protested softly. And I never lied about how grateful I was for your kindness. Everything I felt, everything I feel toward you is real. Tears welled in Emma's eyes. But you deceived me, made me think you were penniless. Jacob took a step forward, heart pounding. I did. I'm sorry. But I had to. My entire life, people only wanted to be around me for my money. I was terrified that the same thing would happen again. And then, you were so kind, so genuine. I was afraid if you knew my secret, everything would change. Emma held up a hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. And did you ever plan on telling me the truth? He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Pain knifed through him. Yes, he whispered. I wanted to. But then Andrew showed up, and everything spiraled. She crossed her arms over her chest, as if trying to shield herself from a chill that wasn't entirely from the night air. So what was I? Jacob. Part of some test. Did you place bets on how I'd react to your sob story? No, he said, voice cracking. It was never about humiliating you or playing a trick. I just needed to know if kindness could exist without money, if love could exist without wealth. Emma's face contorted with emotion, torn between anger, hurt, and the care she couldn't deny she still felt for him. You should have told me sooner. I know he admitted choking on regret. But please believe me. What I feel for you is real. Your kindness saved me. Not because I'm poor, because I'm not. But because I've never had anyone treat me like a real person before. A sob escaped Emma's lips. She glanced at the rolling waves, tears streaming. This is so much to process. I don't know if I can handle this. Jacob's eyes glistened. He wanted to reach for her, to hold her close, but he sensed she wasn't ready. I understand, he said, voice trembling. I'll leave if you want me to. Or if you need time, take it. She wiped her tears, staring at him in quiet agony. How can I trust anything now? My whole perception of you is shattered. He lowered his gaze, fighting back tears of his own. I understand if you hate me. But you told me I didn't have to face my burdens alone. Please, let me prove that my feelings are genuine. Emma hugged herself tighter. For a moment, neither spoke, the only sound the soft hush of the ocean. Then, with a steadiness that belied her inner turmoil, she said, I don't hate you, Jacob. I care about you too much for that. But I'm hurt, and I need to think. He exhaled relief mingled with heartbreak. Take all the time you need. I'll be at the diner if you want to talk. Emma nodded, tears still glistening on her cheeks. She turned away, heading back along the boardwalk, leaving Jacob standing alone under the moon, his confession echoing in the hush of the waves. The next day, Emma didn't come to work. Charlotte told Jacob that Emma had called in sick, her voice shaky. Something about needing time, Charlotte explained with a pointed look in Jacob's direction. He nodded, guilt gnawing at him. By now he suspected Charlotte had pieced things together, at least partially, and disapproved of the deception. That morning, the diner felt oddly quiet despite the usual breakfast crowd. Jacob tried to perform his tasks as normal, but his heart wasn't in it. Every so often he caught Charlotte watching him with an expression that oscillated between pity and frustration. The hours dragged on, and by noon, Jacob found himself anxiously checking the door, hoping Emma might appear. She didn't. By the following day, the tension in his chest grew unbearable. After his shift ended, he drove to Emma's mother's small house, where he guessed Emma might be staying, to clear her head. He parked across the street, summoning courage. The house was modest paint peeling in places, but it had a cozy feel, flowers growing in a small garden out front. Wind chimes tinkling by the porch. He knocked gently. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing Emma's mother, Patricia Lawrence. She recognized Jacob from the diner, though they'd never spoken much. "Jacob," she said. Sounding puzzled, he shifted nervously. "Hi, Miss Lawrence. I'm sorry to bother you. I was just looking for Emma." Patricia studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "She's not feeling well," she said curtly, "and she might not want to see anyone right now." Jacob felt the sting of rejection. "I understand. Just please tell her I stopped by. And tell her I'm sorry." Patricia softened a fraction, seeing the genuine remorse on his face. "I'll let her know." Jacob turned away, shoulders sagging in defeat. He had to accept that Emma needed space. Still, the uncertainty gnawed at him. Would she forgive him? Or would he lose the one person who'd shown him real warmth? 2 more days passed. Emma didn't return to the diner, nor did she respond to Jacob's texts, short apologetic messages he sent, hoping for a reply. Each day, Jacob feared it was over, that his experiment had sabotaged the most sincere connection he'd ever had. In the meantime, trouble brewed from another angle. Richard Caldwell, the local journalist, had been digging. He approached Charlotte one afternoon, brandishing a folder of research. "I have reason to believe Jacob Henderson is not who he says he is," Richard said. "Care to comment?" Charlotte glowered. "I have nothing to say about my employee's personal matters. Now please leave." Richard didn't back down easily. "Rumors suggest he's from the Henderson real estate family." "Does Emma Lawrence know this?" Charlotte bristled. "Look, Richard, even if that's true, it's none of your business. Don't stir up gossip." Richard's voice took on a sharper edge. "I'm just doing my job. People have a right to know if someone's deceiving the community." Charlotte's temper flared. "He's not hurting anyone. Now get out of here before I call the police for trespassing." Seeing he wouldn't get further without a confrontation, Richard left, but not before warning. This story's going to break sooner or later. That evening, Charlotte pulled Jacob aside, her patience worn thin. "You need to handle this," she told him bluntly. Richard's sniffing around. "He'll publish his findings, and the diner will be swarmed by reporters or curious onlookers. Bethany's diner can't handle that kind of chaos." Jacob's stomach churned. "I never intended to harm the diner. I'll do whatever it takes to protect this place." Charlotte sighed, exhaustion evident in her features. "Well, you better figure out a plan fast." Feeling cornered, Jacob made a snap decision. If the truth was going to come out publicly, he wanted Emma to hear it from him directly. He didn't want her blindsided by headlines or rumors. That night he drove to Emma's mother's house again, praying Emma might see him. He knocked, heart pounding. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened, and there stood Emma. Her eyes were puffy as if she'd been crying, but she looked a bit relieved, or at least not shocked, to see him. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice tense with emotion. Emma hesitated, then stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind her. They stood beneath a flickering porch light, the wind chimes tinkling gently. "I know I said I needed space," she began, arms folded protectively. "But I've been thinking a lot." Jacob swallowed. "I'm so sorry, Emma. For the lies, for the way I handled everything. I never wanted to hurt you." She blinked back, fresh tears. "I'm still angry and hurt, but I keep remembering the small things you did, helping Melanie and Lily in the storm, fixing up that car, always looking out for other people. That was real, wasn't it?" He nodded fervently. "Yes, 100%. The dishwasher job, sleeping in my car, that was all me trying to shed the baggage of wealth. But the kindness I showed, the feelings I have for you, those are real. They always were." Emma wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I don't know how we move forward from this. Everything feels tainted." Jacob's voice trembled. "I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust back. If that means stepping away until you're ready, I will. But I wanted you to know a local journalist is digging into my past. He might publish everything soon. I didn't want you to be caught off guard." Emma closed her eyes, bracing herself. "That's just wonderful," she said sarcastically, tears of frustration brimming again. "I guess I should have expected it eventually." Jacob stepped closer, carefully reaching for her hand. This time she didn't pull away, though her fingers remained stiff. "I signed away my voting rights to keep the corporate vultures off my back. I did it so I could stay here in Willowdale near you, if you'll have me." She looked at him with a swirl of emotions, pain, longing, confusion. "Jacob, you don't need to give up your life's opportunities for me. I don't want that responsibility." He shook his head. "My life with all that wealth was empty, Emma. I've never felt more alive than when I'm here, cleaning tables, talking with you. I want a life that feels real. And you're the person who showed me that real kindness exists." Emma's defenses cracked. She let out a sob, allowing him to pull her into a gentle embrace. He held her heartbeat thunderous in his chest, murmuring soft apologies. She wept into his shoulder, the tension of the past days spilling out. When she finally looked up, her cheeks were damp, but her eyes held a fragile resolve. "I don't know how this will work," she confessed, "but I'm willing to try, if you're honest with me from now on." Relief flooded Jacob, tears escaping his own eyes. Always, he vowed, no more secrets. They stood there on the porch, holding on to each other under the glow of the flickering light, uncertain of the future, but united in a shared hope. Far away, a single star broke through the cloudy sky, as if blessing their new beginning. The story of Jacob Henderson and Emma Lawrence reminds us that love and kindness can bloom in the most unexpected places. It teaches us that genuine compassion transcends social status or wealth. In a world often ruled by appearances, Jacob's experiment proved that there are still those like Emma who choose empathy over judgment. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster. If this story touched your heart and renewed your faith in the power of genuine connection, please do us a favor. Like this video to show your support. Share it so more people can experience this uplifting tale, and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming, thought-provoking stories. Your engagement helps us continue creating inspiring content that celebrates kindness, courage, and the transformative power of honesty. After all, we're all searching for a little light in this world, so let's keep shining it together.